Before we dive into this story of justice, resilience, and the power of staying silent when the world screams at you, please take a quick second to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more of these powerful stories to life. Now let's enter the storm. The rain in Oak Creek didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. It was a heavy, relentless downpour that hammered against the roof of Marcus Thorne's 2015 Ford F-150, a rhythm that usually soothed him. But tonight, the rhythm was broken by the sharp, piercing strobe of blue and red lights flooding his rearview mirror. Marcus sighed, a sound barely audible over the hum of the heater. He checked his speedometer. 34 in a 35 zone. His hands, large and rough from years of carpentry and decades of something far more dangerous before that, rested at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel. He didn't panic. Panic was a luxury he had discarded 20 years ago during Hell Week in Coronado. He engaged the turn signal, slowly pulling the truck onto the muddy shoulder of Route 9. The gravel crunched beneath his tires, a stark contrast to the slick asphalt. He put the truck in park, rolled down the window despite the driving rain, and turned off the engine. Then he placed the keys on the dashboard, clear and visible, and returned his hands to the wheel. It was a textbook stop. He was doing everything right. But in Oak Creek, right was often a matter of who you were, not what you did. And Marcus knew exactly who he looked like to the local deputies. A large black man in a working-class truck, passing through a town that preferred its outsiders to keep moving. In the side mirror, he watched the silhouette approach. The officer moved with a swagger that betrayed insecurity, shoulders too high, hand hovering too close to the holster. The beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness, blinding Marcus as it hit the side mirror, and then swung directly into his eyes. "License and registration!" the voice barked. It wasn't a request. It was a challenge. Marcus squinted against the glare, but didn't flinch. "Good evening, officer. My license is in my back pocket. My registration is in the glove box. I'm going to reach for my license first." He spoke with the measured cadence of a man who had negotiated with tribal leaders in Afghanistan and diffused explosives in silence. It was a voice designed to de-escalate. "I didn't ask for a commentary," the officer snapped. The nameplate on his soaked uniform read Miller. He looked young, perhaps 25, with the kind of aggressive haircut that suggested he took himself very seriously. "Just give me the ID." "Moving now," Marcus said calmly. He moved slowly, deliberately. As he handed the plastic card through the window, Miller snatched it. The flashlight beam danced around the cab of the truck, illuminating a bag of tools, a level, and a neatly folded tarp in the back seat. "Carpenter?" Miller asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Yes, sir. I'm renovating the old Miller barn on the east side." The officer let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "That's my uncle's place. I didn't know he was hiring outsiders." He leaned in closer, the rain dripping from the brim of his hat onto Marcus's door panel. "You've got a broken tail light, Thorne." Marcus knew for a fact he didn't. He checked his truck every morning. It was a habit ingrained in him. Check your gear, check your vehicle, check your perimeter. "I checked it this morning, officer. It was functional." "Are you calling me a liar?" Miller's hand tightened on the doorframe. "I'm stating a fact regarding the condition of my vehicle, officer." "Step out of the car." Marcus paused. The legal part of his brain, the part that had read the statutes, knew this was a gray area. But the survival part, the part that wanted to go home to his dog and his quiet life, knew that arguing on the side of a dark road with an agitated man with a gun was a tactical error. "I am stepping out," Marcus said. He opened the door and rose to his full height. Marcus was 6'4", a wall of solid muscle concealed beneath a flannel shirt and a canvas jacket. When he stood, he towered over Deputy Miller. The change in the officer's demeanor was instant, fear masked as aggression. Miller took a step back, his hand flying to his taser. "Turn around, hands on the truck," Miller shouted, his voice cracking slightly. "I am complying," Marcus said softly. He turned, placing his massive hands on the wet metal of the truck. "Spread your legs." Marcus did. He felt the officer's hands patting him down. Clumsy, rough, searching for a reason, any reason to escalate this. Miller found nothing but a pocket knife, which he yanked out and threw onto the wet ground. "You resisting?" Miller hissed in his ear. I am standing perfectly still, Marcus replied. I think you're resisting. Suddenly, Marcus felt a sharp kick to his ankle, forcing his legs wider apart. It was unnecessary, painful, and designed to provoke. Marcus breathed in through his nose, out through his mouth. Control, assess, survive. You're under arrest, Miller announced. For what charge? Marcus asked, his voice remaining level, though the adrenaline was now humming in his veins. Disorderly conduct and resisting arrest, Miller spat. He grabbed Marcus's wrist and wrenched it behind his back, slapping the handcuffs on with excessive force. The metal bit into Marcus's skin. And maybe we'll find something else once we tear this truck apart. As Miller shoved him toward the patrol car, Marcus looked back at his truck, sitting alone in the rain. He didn't struggle, he didn't shout. He didn't tell Miller that he had earned the Navy Cross or that he could dismantle a human body in 6 seconds. He simply lowered his head to clear the doorframe of the cruiser. The trap had been set, but Miller had no idea he had just caught a tiger by the tail. The holding cell at the Oak Creek County Sheriff's Department smelled of stale pine cleaner, unwashed bodies, and despair. It was a small concrete box painted a depressing shade of institutional gray. A single stainless steel toilet sat in the corner, and a wooden bench ran along the back wall. Marcus sat on the bench, his back straight, his eyes closed. He was meditating, a practice he had honed in places far worse than this. In his mind, he was back in the surf at Coronado, the cold water washing over him, the pain fading into background noise. He had been processed an hour ago, fingerprinted, photographed, stripped of his shoelaces and belt. Throughout the entire humiliating ordeal, he hadn't spoken a word unless asked a direct question. Name? Marcus Thorne. D.O.B. August 12, 1980. Occupation? Carpenter. He hadn't offered his military service record. In his experience, flashing a military ID to a corrupt cop either made them jealous or made them feel threatened. Neither outcome was useful. He needed them to underestimate him. He needed them to think he was just a drifter, a nobody who would plead guilty to avoid trouble. The metal door clanged open, and Deputy Miller walked in, accompanied by another officer, older, heavier, with a face like worn leather. This was Sergeant O'Malley. So this is the big guy, huh? O'Malley grunted, looking Marcus up and down through the bars. That's him, Miller said, leaning against the doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips. Resisted on Route 9, huge attitude problem, had a knife on him too. Marcus opened his eyes. He looked at Miller, then at O'Malley. He said nothing. Cat got your tongue now, boy? O'Malley asked, stepping closer to the bars. Miller says you had a lot to say out on the road. I have nothing to say without my attorney, Marcus said. His voice was deep, resonating in the small space. Attorney? Miller laughed. You think a public defender is going to help you? By the time they get here, we'll have processed your truck. Who knows what we might find in there? Maybe some drugs, maybe a stolen gun. It was a threat, plain and simple. They were going to plant evidence, or at least they were threatening to. Marcus's heart rate remained steady at 50 beats per minute. My truck is locked, Marcus said. You do not have my consent to search it without a warrant. Miller's face reddened. I don't need a warrant if I have probable cause, and the probable cause is that you are acting erratic and dangerous. Camera, Marcus said. Just one word. Miller blinked. What? My truck, Marcus continued, his eyes locking onto Miller's. It has a dash cam, front and interior cabin. It uploads to the cloud in real time. It recorded the entire stop. It recorded my speed. It recorded my compliance. And it recorded you kicking me. The silence that followed was heavy. Miller's smirk vanished. O'Malley turned his head sharply to look at the younger deputy. You didn't tell me he had a camera, O'Malley muttered. I didn't see one, Miller stammered. He's bluffing. It's an old truck. Technology is small these days, Marcus said, closing his eyes again. Verify it if you wish. But if you touch that truck, the timestamp will show it. It was a partial bluff. He did have a dashcam and it did record the stop, but the cloud upload feature only worked when he was connected to Wi-Fi. However, the SD card was encrypted. If they tried to destroy it, they would leave traces. But the fear he planted was real. O'Malley grabbed Miller by the shoulder. Hallway now. They left, the heavy steel door slamming shut. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had bought himself time. They would be hesitant to plant drugs now, fearing video evidence would contradict them. But they wouldn't drop the charges. That would be admitting a mistake, and men like Miller didn't make mistakes. They doubled down. Marcus lay back on the hard bench. He thought about the legal system. It was a machine, often fueled by money and connections. He had neither in this town, but he had discipline. He knew that in a battle, the side that loses its temper first loses the war. He spent the night visualizing the courtroom. He built a mental map of the terrain. The judge, the prosecutor, the bailiff. They were the enemy combatants. The law was the terrain. His silence was his camouflage. He drifted into a light sleep, the kind where you hear every footstep, every distant shout. He was a prisoner of war again, if only for a night. But this time the enemy wasn't the Taliban. It was the very system he had fought to protect. The irony didn't escape him, but he didn't let it make him bitter. Bitterness was a distraction. He needed focus. Tomorrow was the arraignment. That was where the real test would begin. The Oak Creek Courthouse was a relic of the early 20th century, all mahogany wood, marble floors, and echoing hallways. It was designed to make the individual feel small and the state feel massive. Marcus was brought in through the back entrance, handcuffed to two other men, one smelling of alcohol, the other shaking from withdrawal. They were led into the courtroom and seated in the jury box, which served as the holding area for arraignments. The room was buzzing with low activity. Lawyers shuffled papers, clerks typed furiously, and the gallery was half full of worried relatives. Marcus scanned the room. He saw Officer Miller sitting in the front row, whispering to a man in a sharp, expensive suit. That would be the prosecutor. Marcus analyzed the prosecutor. Mid-30s, ambitious, checking his watch every 30 seconds. He wanted to be somewhere else. He wanted quick convictions. "All rise!" a bailiff bellowed. Judge Eleanor Vance swept into the room. She was a woman in her 60s with severe glasses and a reputation for being tough on crime, which in Oak Creek meant tough on anyone who wasn't a local. The docket moved quickly. Petty thefts, DUIs, domestic disputes. Most people pleaded guilty or asked for a continuance. It was an assembly line of misery. "State versus Marcus Thorne," the clerk called out. Marcus stood up. The chains on his ankles rattled. He walked to the podium. He towered over the public defender who had been assigned to him 5 minutes ago, a weary man named Mr. Henderson, who hadn't even looked Marcus in the eye. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Vance said, peering over her glasses, "you are charged with resisting arrest, disorderly conduct, and obstruction of justice. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Marcus said clearly. The prosecutor, the man in the sharp suit, stood up. "Your Honor, the state requests bail be set at $50,000. The defendant is a transient with no ties to the community. He was combative with officers and displayed a weapon." "A pocket knife is hardly a weapon in a toolbox, Your Honor, Mr." Henderson mumbled, though he lacked conviction. "It was on his person," the prosecutor shot back, and given his size and aggression, Officer Miller felt his life was in danger. Marcus remained stone-faced, combative, transient. They were painting a picture. "Mr. Thorne," the judge addressed him directly, "do you have anything to say regarding bail?" "I am not a transient, Your Honor," Marcus said. "I have a lease on a property on Elm Street. I have been employed by the Miller family, no relation to the officer, for 3 months as a master carpenter. I have no criminal record." Judge Vance looked at the paperwork. "It says here you refused to provide employment details during booking." "I invoked my right to remain silent, Your Honor." The judge narrowed her eyes. She didn't like defendants who knew their rights. It disrupted the flow. "Bail is set at $10,000, she ruled. "Next case." As Marcus turned to be led back to the holding area, the bailiff, a large, thick-necked man named Deputy Carver, grabbed his arm. "Move it," Carver grunted. Marcus moved, but perhaps not fast enough for Carver, or perhaps Carver just wanted to show the room who was in charge. As they passed the partition separating the defendant's area from the gallery, Carver shoved Marcus forward. It was a hard, unnecessary shove. Marcus stumbled slightly, his shackled feet catching on the carpet. "Watch your step, boy," Carver sneered, loud enough for the front row to hear. Then he did it. Carver raised his hand and slapped the back of Marcus's head. It wasn't a punch, but it was a sharp, stinging strike, a gesture of pure dominance and disrespect, a wake-up call. Thwack. The sound echoed in the quiet courtroom. Marcus stopped. He froze. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to react. Muscle memory from 20 years of combat flared. He could have pivoted, snapped Carver's wrist, and used the man as a human shield before the other deputies even unholstered their weapons. He visualized the movement. Drop weight, elbow strike, joint lock. The room went silent. Even the judge looked up. Marcus slowly turned his head. He looked at Carver. His eyes were dark, bottomless pits. There was no fear in them, only a cold, terrifying calculation. Carver, for a split second, realized he had made a mistake. He saw something in Marcus's eyes that wasn't present in the drunks and petty thieves he usually bullied. He saw a predator. But Marcus didn't strike. He didn't speak. He simply adjusted his jaw, took a deep breath, and turned back to face the exit. He had been slapped in open court. He had been humiliated, and he had done nothing. To the gallery, he looked defeated. To Officer Miller, he looked broken. But inside, Marcus Thorne was smiling, because he knew something they didn't. The courtroom proceedings were recorded. There was a camera in the corner, a small black dome on the ceiling blinking with a red light. Carver had just committed battery on a restrained defendant in front of a judge and a camera. Marcus had his leverage. He wasn't going to fight them with fists. He was going to dismantle them with the very laws they claimed to enforce. As he was led back to the cell, Marcus began to formulate the next phase of his plan. He wouldn't just defend himself against the traffic charges. He was going to go on the offensive. He was going to put the entire Oak Creek Sheriff's Department on trial. The slap was the catalyst. It was the moment the system overplayed its hand. "You okay?" the withdrawal patient whispered to him as they sat back in the holding cell. "That guard is a psycho." Marcus looked at the man and spoke calmly. "He's not a psycho," Marcus said. "He's a liability. And he just gave me the key to the city." The war had officially begun. The air outside the jail smelled of damp earth and ozone, a stark contrast to the antiseptic stench of the holding cells. It was late afternoon. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a heavy grey humidity that clung to the skin. Marcus stood on the sidewalk, holding a clear plastic bag containing his wallet, his keys, and his shoelaces. He sat on a low concrete wall and deliberately relaced his boots. Left over right, pull tight. Right over left, knot. It was a small ritual of reassembling himself, of reclaiming the control they had tried to strip away. He had paid the $10,000 bail via a cashier's check drawn from a bank across the street. The bail bondsman had looked at him with a mixture of pity and suspicion, but Marcus hadn't explained where a carpenter got that kind of liquidity. He didn't explain that he lived simply, saved everything, and had a pension from 20 years of service that he barely touched. His first stop was not his home. It was the impound lot. The lot was a muddy field surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. A rusted trailer served as the office. Inside, a man with grease-stained fingers and a cigarette hanging from his lip looked up from a portable TV. $250 for the tow, $50 for the day, the man grunted. Marcus placed the cash on the counter. He didn't argue the price, he just wanted access. When he walked out to his F-150, he did a walk-around inspection. He noted the mud on the driver's side floor mat, mud that wasn't his. He noted the glove box was slightly askew. They had searched it. He knew they would. He climbed in, started the engine, and immediately checked the dashcam system tucked behind the rearview mirror. The power light blinked red. He pulled the SD card out with surgical precision and slipped it into the hidden pocket of his waistband. He didn't drive home. He drove to the Oak Creek Public Library. It was a quiet place, filled with the smell of old paper and dust. He found a computer in the corner, inserted the SD card and began to review the footage. The video was crisp. It showed the rain-slicked road. It showed his speedometer at 34 miles per hour. It captured the audio of the turn signal clicking. It captured the stop. But the most damning part wasn't just the stop. It was the audio after Marcus had been placed in the squad car. The camera in his truck was still rolling, capturing the conversation between Deputy Miller and Sergeant O'Malley as they stood near the hood of his truck searching it. "You find anything?" O'Malley's voice was faint but audible. Just tools, a tarp, Miller replied. Maybe we sprinkle something? Not with the camera, O'Malley snapped. Just tow it. We'll stick him with the resisting charge. Judge Vance hates outsiders. Marcus leaned back in the library chair, a cold calm settling over him. Conspiracy to fabricate evidence. It was a felony, and he had it on tape. But he wasn't done. The slap in the courtroom was the emotional anchor of his case. He needed that footage. He walked to the front desk. A young librarian with bright blue glasses looked up. Can I help you? I need to know the public records request procedure for the county courthouse, Marcus said softly. She blinked. Oh, usually you have to go to the clerk of court's office, basement level of the courthouse, but they close in 20 minutes. Thank you. Marcus moved with a speed that belied his size. He was back at the courthouse 10 minutes later. He went through the metal detectors, ignoring the smirks of the deputies who recognized him. He found the clerk's office. The woman behind the glass partition looked tired. Her name tag read Brenda. I would like to file a FOIA request for the security footage of courtroom B from this morning, between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., Marcus stated, sliding a handwritten form he had drafted on a notepad. Brenda looked at the form, then at Marcus. Her eyes widened slightly. She knew who he was. Gossip traveled faster than light in Oak Creek. Security footage is sensitive, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It usually requires a judge's order. It's a public courtroom, Marcus corrected her gently. Under state law, proceedings are matter of public record unless sealed by a specific order. There was no seal order. Brenda hesitated. She looked at the door behind her as if afraid someone would walk in. She reached for a stamp. I can accept the request, she said nervously, but I can't promise you'll get it. The system, it deletes things sometimes. Glitches. I understand, Marcus said. Just stamp it, please, so I have proof I asked. She stamped the paper. Received. Marcus took his copy. He looked Brenda in the eye. Thank you, Brenda. You just did the right thing. He walked out. He knew they would try to delete the footage. In fact, he was counting on it. Destruction of evidence was a much harder charge to dodge than a simple assault. He was building a trap, layer by layer, and the sheriff's department was walking right into it. By the next morning, the atmosphere in Oak Creek had shifted. Marcus was staying in a small rental cottage on the edge of town, near the woods. It was a quiet place, usually, but at 6 a.m., a sheriff's cruiser rolled slowly past his driveway. It didn't stop, it just rolled, the driver staring at the house. 20 minutes later, it came back, then again at 7 a.m. It was a classic intimidation tactic. We are watching you. You are not safe. Marcus stood on his porch holding a mug of black coffee. He wore his work boots and jeans. He watched the cruiser pass for the 4th time. He raised his mug in a mock toast. The cruiser accelerated and sped off. They were nervous. Marcus went to work at the Miller barn. The irony that he was working for the uncle of the man who arrested him wasn't lost on him. Mr. Miller, an elderly man with hands twisted by arthritis, met him at the gate. Marcus, the old man said, looking down at his boots, I heard about the trouble. It's being handled, sir, Marcus said, unloading his saw. My nephew, he's a hothead, Mr. Miller said, his voice shaking. But the family, the sheriff, they're saying you're dangerous. They're saying you threatened to kill a cop. Marcus stopped. He looked at the old man. Do you believe that, Mr. Miller? You've watched me work for 3 months. You've had lunch with me. Do I seem like a man who threatens people? Mr. Miller looked up, his eyes watery. He saw the steady, calm demeanor of the man before him. No, you don't. But Marcus, I can't have trouble here. I can't have the sheriff harassing my farm. I understand, Marcus said. I'll finish the roof framing today, then I'll pack up. You won't see me again until this is over. I'm sorry, the old man whispered. Don't be, Marcus said. Fear makes good people do hard things. He worked like a machine that day. He channeled his anger into the wood. Every nail he drove was a release of pressure. By the time the sun began to set, the roof frame was finished, a skeleton of perfect geometric angles against the orange sky. When he drove back to his rental, he noticed a black sedan trailing him, 2 car lengths back, tinted windows, unmarked. Marcus didn't speed up. He didn't turn down a side street. He drove directly to the town's only diner, Sally's. He parked under the brightest street lamp. He walked inside. The diner went quiet. Every head turned. The cop-killer narrative had evidently spread. Marcus walked to the counter and sat down. "Coffee, please, and a slice of pie." The waitress, a woman named Carla who had served him a dozen times with a smile, now looked terrified. She poured the coffee with a trembling hand, spilling a little on the saucer. "On the house," she whispered. Please don't cause trouble." "I'm just eating pie, Carla," Marcus said gently. As he ate, the door opened. Sheriff Grady walked in. Grady was a massive man, built like a linebacker gone to seed. He had silver hair and a face that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite. He wasn't wearing a uniform, he was in a suit. He sat on the stool next to Marcus. The diner was deadly silent. "You're causing a lot of waves for a carpenter," Grady said, staring straight ahead at the menu board. "I'm just swimming, Sheriff," Marcus replied, not looking up from his pie. "You filed a request for video footage," Grady said. "Brenda told me. Systems malfunction. Data gets corrupted. It would be a shame if you pinned your hopes on a video that doesn't exist." "It would be," Marcus agreed. "But then eyewitness testimony becomes very important." "Witnesses?" Grady laughed, a low, dry sound. "In this town? Boy, nobody saw anything. You tripped, you fell. Deputy Carver helped you up." "That's the story." Marcus finally turned to look at him. "Is that the official report?" "It will be." "And the traffic stop? Was that routine?" "Textbook," Grady said. "Look, Thorne, I've looked into you. Navy, honorable discharge, impressive ribbons. But you're not in the sandbox anymore. You're in my county. And in my county we maintain order. You challenging my deputies disrupts order. So here is the deal. You plead to the disorderly. We drop the resisting. You pay a fine and you leave town. Tonight." Marcus took a sip of coffee. He savored the bitterness. "I have a lease," Marcus said, "and I have a job to finish." Grady's face hardened. "You don't have a job. Miller fired you an hour ago. And as for the lease, I think your landlord might find some code violations that require immediate eviction." "So it's a siege," Marcus observed. "It's an eviction," Grady corrected. "Leave, or we will bury you under so much legal paperwork and harassment you'll wish you died in Kandahar." Marcus placed a $5 bill on the counter. He stood up. He leaned in close to the sheriff, his voice a low rumble that only Grady could hear. "Sheriff, you looked up my file, but you didn't read between the lines. I was a SEAL, yes. But my specialty wasn't shooting. It was dismantling networks. You just threatened a private citizen in a public place. You're not the hunter here. You're the prey, you just don't know it yet." Marcus walked out. Grady sat there staring at the coffee cup Marcus had left behind. For the first time in 10 years, the sheriff felt a flicker of genuine uncertainty. Marcus knew he couldn't win this alone. He needed a mouthpiece, a shield. He didn't go to the local lawyers, they all played golf with Grady. He drove 2 hours south to the city, to a firm he had researched the night before. Carter and Associates, civil rights specialists. David Carter was a man who looked like he slept in his suit. He was disheveled, frantic, and brilliant. His office was a tornado of paper. "So," Carter said, rubbing his eyes, "you want to sue a small-town sheriff because a deputy slapped you? Mr. Thorne, that's terrible, but it's," he said, she said. "Without video, federal court will laugh us out. Qualified immunity protects them unless the violation is egregious and clearly established." "I have the video," Marcus said. Carter stopped rubbing his eyes. "You said the courthouse tape was likely deleted." "It likely is," Marcus said. "But I have this." He placed a USB drive on the desk. "This is the dashcam footage from the arrest. It proves the stop was pretextual. It proves I was compliant. And it captures the audio of them conspiring to plant evidence." Carter plugged the drive in. He watched the screen. His eyes widened. He listened to the audio of Miller and O'Malley. A slow smile spread across his face. "Okay," Carter said. This is gold. This destroys their credibility. If they lied about the arrest, the judge has to assume they're lying about the courtroom incident." "There is more," Marcus said. "I need you to file an emergency injunction to preserve the courthouse server. Don't ask for the video. Ask for the metadata of the deletion. Carter looked at Marcus with newfound respect. You want to catch them in the cover-up. The cover-up is always worse than the crime, Marcus recited. If they deleted it after I filed the request, that's spoliation of evidence. That's criminal. I'll file it today, Carter said, energized. But we need to go public. We need to apply pressure so they can't sweep this under the rug before the judge sees it. Do it, Marcus said. Release the dashcam. 3 hours later, the video titled Oak Creek PD Conspiracy to Plant Evidence went live on social media. Marcus drove back to Oak Creek as the sun went down. His phone began to buzz. Unknown numbers, media requests, hate mail, support mail. He parked at his rental cottage. His landlord was waiting on the porch, looking nervous. Marcus, The building inspector was here, the landlord stammered. He says the wiring is bad. You have to vacate. Tonight. I figured, Marcus said calmly. He didn't argue. He walked past the landlord, entered the cottage, and packed his single duffel bag. He walked back out, threw the bag in his truck, and looked at the landlord. You're a good man, John. Don't let them bully you. Where will you go? The landlord asked, ashamed. I'll find a spot, Marcus said. He drove his truck to the Walmart parking lot on the edge of town. It was well lit with cameras everywhere. He reclined his seat. He would sleep there. As he settled in, he checked his phone. The video had 50,000 views, then 100,000. The comments were exploding. People were outraged. The audio of Maybe We Sprinkle Something was being shared across every platform. In the sheriff's office, the mood was apocalyptic. Phones were ringing off the hook. Sheriff Grady stared at his computer screen, watching the view count climb. Get Miller in here, Grady roared. And get that idiot Carver. The first salvo had been fired. Marcus Thorne, the silent carpenter, had just declared war. And he hadn't even thrown a punch. But Marcus knew the hardest part was coming. Now that they were cornered, they would be dangerous. They wouldn't just try to arrest him now, they would try to destroy him. He closed his eyes, his hand resting near the ignition. He was ready. By noon on the third day, Oak Creek was no longer a sleepy town. It was a national headline. The release of the dashcam footage had acted like a match thrown into a powder keg. The audio of Deputy Miller and Sergeant O'Malley discussing sprinkling evidence had been played on every major news network. Hashtags were trending. The internet detectives were hard at work, digging up the pasts of Sheriff Grady and his deputies. Marcus Thorne sat on the tailgate of his truck in the Walmart parking lot, watching the circus arrive. Satellite trucks from news stations in the state capital were parking in the adjacent rows. Reporters with perfectly coiffed hair were doing stand-ups in front of the sheriff's department, their voices rising over the hum of generators. Marcus hadn't spoken to any of them. He had received 100 calls from journalists, producers, and podcasters. He declined them all. He knew that the moment he opened his mouth, he became a personality. He became someone they could critique, analyze, and twist. By remaining silent, he remained a symbol. He was the man who followed the rules and got crushed for it. Across town, inside the sheriff's station, the atmosphere was suffocating. Sheriff Grady stood at a podium in the briefing room, sweating under the glare of camera lights. The video circulating online is highly edited and taken out of context, Grady lied, his voice booming with false confidence. What you don't hear is the aggressive behavior of the suspect prior to the stop. My deputies were engaging in hypothetical scenario planning, not a conspiracy. We are a law and order county. We do not plant evidence. A reporter from a city paper raised her hand. Sheriff, the audio clearly says, maybe we sprinkle something. Is sprinkle a standard police term for scenario planning? Grady's jaw tightened. I am not going to discuss internal tactics. Next question. Has there been an internal investigation launched regarding the alleged assault in the courtroom? Another reporter shouted. There was no assault, Grady snapped. The suspect stumbled. This is a non-story being blown up by outside agitators who hate law enforcement. Grady cut the conference short, storming back into his office. He slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. Deputy Carver was sitting there, looking pale. You idiot, Grady hissed. You slapped him, in front of a camera. You said the camera was wiped, Carver mumbled. It is, Grady growled. But now his lawyer is filing motions for the hard drives, and we have the FBI sniffing around the edges. We need this guy gone, Carver. We need him to break. How? He's living in a parking lot, Grady said, a cruel smile touching his lips. That's loitering. That's a public nuisance. Go move him. And if he resists, well, this time, make sure the body cams are off accidentally. An hour later, 3 cruisers rolled into the Walmart parking lot. They didn't use sirens, they just glided in like sharks, surrounding Marcus's truck. Marcus was eating a sandwich he'd bought from the deli. He didn't stop eating as Deputy Carver and 2 others stepped out. A crowd began to form instantly. Shoppers stopped pushing their carts. People pulled out their phones. In the modern age, the smartphone is the greatest weapon against tyranny. "Thorne!" Carver shouted. "You can't stay here, private property." Marcus finished chewing, swallowed, and wiped his mouth. He picked up a piece of paper from the seat next to him. "I have written permission from the store manager," Marcus said calmly, holding up the note. "Walmart policy allows RV and overnight parking for travelers. I am a customer." Carver snatched the note. He didn't even read it. He crumbled it up and threw it on the ground. "Manager changed his mind," Carver said. "We got complaints. People feel threatened by a transient living in the lot. You have 5 minutes to move this vehicle or we tow it." Marcus looked at the crumpled paper on the asphalt. Then he looked at the crowd. There were 20 phones pointed at Carver. A young man was live streaming, narrating the event to thousands of viewers. "You are ordering me to leave?" Marcus asked. "I am." "And if I refuse?" "Then you go to jail for trespassing and failure to obey a lawful order." It was a trap. If Marcus drove away, they would pull him over a mile down the road for some fabricated reason, and this time there would be no witnesses. If he stayed, they would drag him out. Marcus made a choice. He stepped out of the truck. He locked the door. He put the keys in his pocket. "I am not driving," Marcus said. "I am too fatigued to drive safely. Under state law, it is illegal to operate a motor vehicle while impaired by fatigue. If you force me to drive, you are ordering me to commit a crime." Carver blinked. He hadn't expected that. "Then we tow it with you watching," Carver sneered. He waved at a tow truck that had been idling nearby, a local company contracted by the sheriff. The tow truck driver, a burly man named Big Al, backed his rig up to the F-150. He hopped out, chains in hand. But then Big Al looked around. He saw the phones. He saw the news van pulling into the lot. He saw Marcus Thorne standing there, a silent giant, arms crossed, looking at him with no anger, just disappointment. Big Al looked at Carver. "Sheriff, I can't hook this." "What?" Carver screamed. "Do your job." "There's 100 people filming, Carver," Big Al hissed. "My business name is on the side of this truck. If I tow a veteran's truck illegally while the whole internet watches, I'm out of business by morning. I ain't doing it." Big Al threw the chains back onto the bed of his truck. "Find someone else." He climbed back in and drove off. The crowd erupted in cheers. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone." Carver's face turned a violent shade of purple. He put his hand on his baton. He wanted to swing. He wanted to hurt someone, but the weight of the eyes on him was too heavy. "This isn't over," Carver pointed at Marcus. "Nighttime comes every day, Thorne. The cameras turn off eventually." The deputies retreated. Marcus picked up the crumpled note from the ground, smoothed it out and put it in his pocket. He nodded once to the crowd, then sat back on his tailgate. He had won the skirmish, but Carver's threat hung in the air. Nighttime comes every day. Marcus knew they wouldn't come with badges next time. They would come in the dark with no identification. He needed to be ready. While Marcus held the line in the parking lot, the real war was being fought in the sleek, air-conditioned offices of the federal courthouse in the city. Attorney David Carter was pacing the floor of his office. Sitting across from him was a woman named Sarah, a digital forensics expert who cost $400 an hour and was worth every penny. "Talk to me, Sarah," Carter said. "The sheriff's department claims the video of the slap was lost due to a routine server purge." "How do we buy it?" Sarah spun her laptop around. "David, computers are like elephants, they never forget. Even when you tell them to forget, they remember that you told them." She pointed to a string of code on the screen. "I gained remote access to the courthouse's public server logs, perfectly legal as it's a public network. I couldn't see the video files, but I can see the activity logs." "And?" "Here." she pointed. At 10:15 a.m. right after Thorne's arraignment, the file courtroom B900-1000.mp4 was accessed. It was viewed. By who? Logan ID Admin Sheriff, Sarah read. That's a root access login. It's usually reserved for the sheriff or his top IT guy. So they watched it, Carter said, his eyes narrowing. They saw the slap. They did. And then, at 10:22 a.m., a command was executed. Secure delete. Sarah looked up. That's not a glitch. That's not a routine purge. A routine purge just marks the space as available. A secure delete overwrites the file with zeros 7 times. It's a military-grade wipe. You only do that if you want to make sure God himself can't recover that file. Carter slammed his hand on the desk. Spoliation. Intentional destruction of evidence in anticipation of litigation. That's a felony. And it proves consciousness of guilt. Wait, there's more, Sarah said. The command came from a terminal inside the clerk of court's office. But the clerk, Brenda, wasn't logged in. The admin sheriff override was used. Someone walked into the clerk's office, pushed her aside and wiped the drive, Carter realized. We need Brenda. If she talks, it's over, Sarah said. Back in Oak Creek, darkness had fallen. The Walmart parking lot had quieted down. The news vans had left for the night, their crews retreating to hotels. The crowd had dispersed. It was 2 a.m. Marcus wasn't sleeping in the cab of his truck tonight. That was a coffin. Instead, he had set up a makeshift perimeter. He had strung a thin line of fishing wire, part of his tackle box gear, between 2 shopping cart corrals and his bumper. Attached to the wire were empty soda cans with pebbles inside. A primitive alarm system. He lay in the bed of the truck under the tarp, wide awake. He held a heavy wrench in his hand. He didn't own a gun anymore. He had given them up when he left the service, seeking peace. But he didn't need a gun to be dangerous. At 2:45 a.m. he heard it. The crunch of tires on asphalt. Slow, heavy. A pickup truck, lifted, with no lights on, rolled into the row behind him. Then another. Doors opened. The sound of boots hitting the ground. Whispers. Clink-clank. The fishing line tripped. The cans rattled against the asphalt. Damn it, a voice hissed. He rigged it. Just rush him, another voice said. It sounded like Carver, but deeper, distorted by something. A ski mask? Marcus moved. He didn't wait for them to reach the truck. He exploded from under the tarp, vaulting over the side of the truck bed. He landed in a crouch, the wrench heavy in his right hand. There were 4 of them. They wore dark clothes and balaclavas. They held baseball bats. "Get him!" one shouted. The first man swung. It was a clumsy, angry swing. A bar brawler's swing. Marcus stepped inside the arc. He didn't swing the wrench. He used his left hand to block the man's forearm, deadening the blow, and drove his right shoulder into the man's solar plexus. The man folded like a lawn chair, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The second man hesitated. That was his mistake. Marcus swept his leg, a low, hard kick to the perineal nerve on the side of the thigh. The man's leg gave out, and he hit the ground hard. "Police!" the third man shouted instinctively. Marcus paused. "You're not police tonight," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Tonight, you're just criminals." The third and fourth men looked at their fallen comrades. They looked at Marcus, who stood untouched, breathing rhythmically, the wrench hanging loosely by his side. They realized the difference between a bully and a warrior. A bully needs fear to win. A warrior needs only skill. "Leave," Marcus commanded. "Take them and leave." The 2 standing men grabbed their wheezing friends. They dragged them back to the trucks. They peeled out, tires screeching, fleeing into the night. Marcus didn't chase them. He didn't celebrate. He pulled out his phone. He dialed Lawyer Carter. "Marcus?" Carter answered, his voice groggy. "It's 3 a.m. "They tried," Marcus said. "Vigilantes or off-duty deputies, I couldn't tell." "Are you hurt?" "No, but they are." "Marcus, you need to get out of there. They'll come back with guns." "No," Marcus said. "They won't come back." "I broke their spirit, but Carter, we need to end this tomorrow. I can't hold the line forever." "We're ready," Carter said, fully awake now. "We found the digital footprint. They wiped the server. And Marcus, we know who was in the room." "Who?" "It wasn't Carver. Carter said. It was Grady himself. He used his admin login, but he did it from Brenda's terminal. Brenda, Marcus said, the tired woman at the clerk's office. She's the key, Carter said. If she testifies that Grady physically took over her computer to delete that file, Grady goes to prison. She's terrified, Marcus said. She lives here. They'll destroy her. She needs to know she's not alone, Carter said. We need to get to her before Grady does, because once he realizes we know about the logs, she becomes a loose end. Marcus looked out at the empty parking lot. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold resolve. I'll get to her, Marcus said. Meet me at the courthouse at 8 a.m. We're going to walk right through the front door. Marcus, you have a warrant for, well, nothing valid, but they'll arrest you on sight. Let them, Marcus said. That's exactly where I need to be. He hung up. He looked at the wrench in his hand, then tossed it back into the toolbox. The physical battle was over. The psychological war was about to reach its climax. Marcus Thorne was going back to the place where it all started. He was going back to be slapped again, but this time the world would feel the impact. The morning sun over Oak Creek was pale and watery, struggling to break through a low bank of fog. It was 7:45 a.m. The courthouse square was deceptively quiet, save for a street sweeper making its slow rounds. Brenda, the clerk of courts, parked her sedan in her usual spot. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped her keys twice before picking them up. She hadn't slept. She knew what she had seen. She knew what she had let happen. She walked toward the employee entrance. Standing there, leaning against the brick wall, was Sheriff Grady. He wasn't wearing his uniform. He was in a dark raincoat, looking like a looming shadow. He wasn't smiling. "Morning, Brenda," Grady said, pushing off the wall to block her path. "Sheriff," Brenda whispered, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. "You look tired," Grady said, his voice smooth but heavy with implication. "Stress is a killer, Brenda. You need to be careful. You don't want to make mistakes, like misremembering who was in your office yesterday." Brenda looked down at her shoes. I have to go to work, Sheriff." "We protect our own, Brenda." Grady stepped closer, invading her personal space. "That pension of yours is close, 2 years. It would be a shame if an administrative audit found some irregularities in your filing. You know how complex these things get." It was a naked threat. Her pension, her livelihood. Grady was holding her future hostage. "I didn't see anything," Brenda said, her voice trembling. "I swear." "Good girl," Grady smiled, a cold, shark-like expression. "Just keep the computer glitches to yourself. I'll handle the rest." He reached out to pat her shoulder. "Don't touch her." The voice didn't come from Brenda. It came from the fog. Grady spun around. Marcus Thorne was standing 10 feet away. He wore clean work clothes, jeans, boots, a fresh flannel shirt. He looked rested. He looked ready. "Thorne," Grady sneered, his hand instinctively moving to his hip, though he wasn't wearing his duty belt. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face here. You're trespassing." "It's a public sidewalk," Marcus said, stepping forward. He didn't move aggressively. He moved like a tank, slow, unstoppable, inevitable. He positioned himself between Grady and Brenda. He turned his back to the sheriff, a gesture of supreme disrespect and protection, and looked at Brenda. "Brenda," Marcus said softly, "my name is Marcus. I'm the man whose life they are trying to ruin. But today, I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you." I can't," Brenda stammered, tears welling up. "He's the sheriff. He's a man," Marcus corrected her. "A man who is scared. Look at him." Brenda peeked around Marcus's massive shoulder. She saw Grady, and for the first time, she didn't see a powerful authority figure. She saw a man sweating in the cool morning air, his eyes darting around. "Brenda," Marcus continued, "my lawyer is parking his car right now. He has logs from the server. We know the file was deleted, we know the login used was his, but we need to know who sat in the chair. If you lie for him, you become a co-conspirator. You go to prison for him. Is he worth that?" "Thorne, shut up," Grady barked, stepping forward. "You're tampering with a witness." "I'm telling her the truth," Marcus said, still not turning around. "The truth is the only thing that's going to save her." A black sedan screeched to a halt at the curb. David Carter, the lawyer, jumped out. He wasn't alone. 2 men in suits followed him. They wore blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back. FBI. Grady froze. "Sheriff Grady!" Carter shouted, waving a stack of papers. "We have a federal warrant for the seizure of the courthouse server towers and a subpoena for the testimony of Clerk Brenda Higgins." Grady looked at the FBI agents. He looked at Brenda. He looked at Marcus. The color drained from the sheriff's face. He realized the trap hadn't been in the parking lot. The trap was here in the light of day. Marcus finally turned to face Grady. He looked down at the sheriff. "You told me nighttime comes every day," Marcus said, "but so does the morning." Brenda took a deep breath. She looked at Marcus, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. Then she looked at the FBI agents. "I'll talk," Brenda said, her voice clear and strong. "I'll tell you everything. He made me type the password." Grady slumped against the wall. It was over. The silence had been broken. It took 3 months for the dust to settle. The fallout was swift and brutal. The digital forensics were irrefutable. The secure delete command, combined with Brenda's testimony that Sheriff Grady had physically stood over her and forced her to grant admin access, was enough to trigger a cascade of indictments. Sheriff Grady was charged with obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and witness intimidation. He resigned in disgrace 2 days after the confrontation on the sidewalk. Deputy Miller and Sergeant O'Malley were fired after the dashcam footage, and the conspiracy to plant evidence was formally admitted into the record. They were currently facing state charges for filing false police reports. Deputy Carver, the man who had slapped Marcus, faced the harshest penalty. Even though the video was gone, the cover-up proved the consciousness of guilt. He took a plea deal to avoid jail time, surrendering his badge and agreeing to a lifetime ban from law enforcement. As for Marcus Thorne, all charges were dismissed with prejudice. The judge apologized to him on the record, a rare occurrence that made the evening news. But Marcus wasn't in the courtroom to hear it. He had signed a power of attorney for Carter to handle the formalities. He had work to do. On a crisp Tuesday afternoon, Marcus was up on the roof of the Miller barn. The air smelled of drying hay and cedar. He placed the final shingle. He tapped the nail in with a single, precise strike of his hammer. Tap, bang, done. He stood up and walked to the edge of the roof. From this height, he could see the whole town. He saw the sheriff's station, now under the interim command of a state trooper who was cleaning house. He saw the diner, where Carla was probably pouring coffee. He saw the road leading out of town. "Looks good, Marcus," a voice called from below. It was Mr. Miller. The old man was leaning on his cane, shielding his eyes from the sun. Marcus climbed down the ladder, his movements fluid and easy. "Roof is sealed, Mr. Miller," Marcus said, wiping his hands on a rag. "It'll hold for another 50 years. "You did a fine job," the old man said. He hesitated, then pulled an envelope from his pocket. "Here's the final payment, plus a bonus for the trouble." Marcus took the envelope. He opened it, counted out the agreed-upon sum for the labor, and handed the bonus back. "The price is the price," Marcus said. "I don't charge for trouble." Mr. Miller smiled, a genuine, crinkle-eyed smile. "You're a stubborn man, Marcus Thorne." "I just like things square," Marcus replied. He walked to his truck, the same F-150, now washed and clean. He threw his tools in the back. The dashcam blinked its steady red light, a silent guardian. "Where will you go?" Mr. Miller asked. "You know. People here, they respect you now. You could stay. You could probably run for mayor if you wanted." Marcus chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "I'm a carpenter, sir, not a politician, and the roof is done." "So, just moving on?" "There's always another job," Marcus said. "Always another storm." He opened the truck door and climbed in. He started the engine. The rumble of the V8 was a familiar comfort. As he pulled out of the driveway, he passed a patrol car coming the other way. It was a new deputy, a young woman Marcus didn't recognize. She slowed down as she passed him. She didn't glare. She didn't flash her lights. She simply raised 2 fingers from the steering wheel in a respectful wave. Marcus returned the nod, kept his hands at 10 and 2 and drove toward the highway. He hadn't burned the town down. He hadn't fought violence with violence. He had simply held up a mirror and forced them to look at their own reflection until they couldn't stand the sight of it. The silent warrior merged onto Route 9, the same road where it had all begun. He checked his speedometer, 35 miles per hour. Perfect. He engaged his turn signal, the clicking sound a metronome of order in a chaotic world, and disappeared into the horizon.